One of the most tragic funerals that I've ever conducted as a rabbi was for a young person in their 20s who passed away from a terrible, terrible disease. And while there's a lot that I could talk about with you about that funeral this morning and what was challenging and difficult about it, I want to share with you one observation before I invite Arden to the bima to speak in just a moment about that particular funeral. As if it wasn't made difficult enough by the fact that it took place during COVID, and so there were a limited number of people allowed at the grave sites. There was also a group of friends of this person who had passed away that stood off to the side, largely because of the restrictions having to do with COVID. I then gave my eulogy, and I should tell you that this funeral was for someone who identified as non-binary. I don't think I ever looked up from the page once. I wanted to make sure I got the pronoun correctly. The pronoun was they, the proper pronoun. And then something fairly extraordinary happened after I gave that eulogy. And that's that this young person's friends came from being outside of the tent, standing about 50 feet away, to come under the tent, where this person's friends joined us for the duration of the funeral. Fast forward to the Shiva that took place over Zoom, and two of this person's friends, also non-binary, part of a community, said to me the following words. They did not grow up in the Jewish faith, they grew up in another tradition, but they said, Rabbi, we didn't know religion was something that brought people together. We thought religion was something that pushed people away. And I have to say that in the 21st century, as we as Jews take a hard look at ourselves and what it is that we try to do in this space, there can be no greater tragedy than if we perpetuate a religion in which people think we are trying to push people away rather than to bring people in. And I think that what today is really all about is creating opportunities for folks to know and to publicly declare from this bima that our Judaism, conservative Judaism, our study of Torah, our commitment to mitzvot, our commitment to living a Jewish life, is a legacy available to all who wish to access it, regardless of what gender they identify as or who they love. That is what Breshit teaches us. That is the power and the meaning of human dignity that we read in our parashah. Of course, I wanted to say after that call to those folks, well, come on down to Congregation Eitz Chaim. We got a great place here, and I'm sorry that your faith tradition that you were raised in did not include you in the way that you wish to have been included. But as an inclusive synagogue from this bima, I want to once again state that our faith tradition, our understanding of Judaism, includes all who wish to be a part of it. And with this in mind, I want to invite Arden Wilson to our bima this morning. We say welcome. We're delighted you are joining with us. I know we had an opportunity to study Torah together. You have some beautiful words of Torah to share with us. And of course, I want to wish a mazel tov to your family as well, who's gathered here to celebrate with you this Shabbat.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Let me fix the mic and move a little closer. You got it? Perfect.
Yeah. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As this is our first Pride Shabbat we are doing at Eitz Chaim, on the new first Torah portion of the year, I'd like to invite you to join me in reciting the Shechechianu, a prayer we say over new beginnings together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shechechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu la'azman hazeh. Breshit, New Beginnings, is a very appropriate theme that is reflective of our service and what we are doing here today. Through my own experiences as a non-binary queer person, I constantly experience firsts in my life. My first queer kiss, how I had to pay over $300 to legally change my name, or having to explain to people what being non-binary means and why it's valid. As I don't have many examples or representation to look towards, I find myself having to make a lot of these firsts on my own, which is intimidating and exhilarating. As a child, I remember learning the story of Bereshit and the creation story. As you can imagine, the story seemed very black and white, literally the creation of night and day. However, as I studied the story in preparation for this moment of new beginnings as an adult, reflective of themes for today, I see just how much room there is for interpretation, different perspectives, and personal meaning in the story. Let's, for example, talk about the Hebrew language. The Hebrew language has two grammatical genders, masculine and feminine. But did you know that Adam was both originally created as male and female? What does that even mean? There's a lot of room for interpretation because translations of the Bible into English are less concrete. According to the Talmud, there's no fewer than 6 genders. So what was Adam? And further, what gender is God? In Hebrew, the pronoun he is correctly translated into English as it, but in our experience, God is almost always referred to by the masculine language. This presents problems for translation. The translator must decide what kind of he they're dealing with. Some of our texts present a first human being who is bigendered or non-gendered. Neither Hebrew nor Standard English has the pronouns to account for such a person. Additionally, a multigendered person made in God's image implies, in turn, a multigendered God. From my perspective, a translation should not impose a gender on God unless the author clearly intended it to be so. Also, studying this text as an adult, I began to wonder, in this very male-female centric dynamic in Genesis, is there a place for same-sex love in the Torah and in Jewish tradition? I found a meaningful reflection written by Greg Jenkwater, a professor of Jewish studies at the University of Colorado, called Affirming the Sanctity of Same-Sex Love, that speaks to this very subject. He writes, when reading Bereshit through a queer lens, you see something different. The divine plan is still there, with its focus on synergy and the joyous harmony of creation. But where the traditional view finds the climax in the union of a man and a woman, the queer reader sees the joining together of Adam and Eve as merely a vehicle for the real end point, love. More specifically, love as tikkun, as repair and as a solution to the ultimate loneliness of being. By this understanding, Adam represents for me the entire spectrum of both heavenly and humanly, two distinct parts of qualities, dualities of human condition. In other words, as Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman, a rabbi in the Talmud, taught, a human being's gender is less important than the other choices an individual makes or the identities they might inhabit. It is my hope that we can all learn from this reading to share and discuss these important questions about Bereshit. Our rabbis teach us that there are no fewer than 70 different ways to interpret the Torah. Whether it's the way we use our language or the lenses through which we see life and love, may we all continue to explore how Judaism can speak to the challenges of the LGBTQIA+ community today, and with all of its nuances and complexities that come from experiencing life not as an individual, but as a collective. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Yashikah.